We will do so by first giving you an introduction to Open Science, which is the main motivation of the European Open Science Cloud. Then we will talk about the service offerings that are put into the early adopter program by the EOSC-hub, OCRE, OpenAIRE, and GÉANT projects or initiatives. We will show a few example use cases about communities who already adopt those services to give you some motivational examples of how others are benefiting from similar setups. And then we will close this introductory part with talking about the early adopter program itself, giving you information on the conditions and the process of application. After the presentation, there will be plenty of time for question and answers. So I ask you to hold your questions back until then, or in the meantime, you can write questions in the chat window and we will pick those up during this question and answer session. So let me start with the brief introduction of Open Science and the European Open Science Cloud, because I fear that some of you may not be so familiar with those terms. The term Open Science actually is the foundation of science itself, because it's about the movement of making scientific research and the outcome of science accessible as broadly to the different levels of society as possible. It gained significant momentum recently because of new technologies, approaches, and policies emerged from different member states, European member states, as well as from the movement of European Commission-led initiatives. Virtualization, containers, cloud infrastructures, the open access movement as a whole, and the recent terms FAIR, which stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, makes a significant contribution to achieving open science and opening up the scientific outcomes for different levels of the society. When we talk about scientific outcomes, here the focus is not only on publications, which is the traditional outcome of science, but also the data, samples, and different software and approaches that have been adopted by the scientific methodologies to process data, generate data, to share data. Fundamentally, the ultimate goal is to make science reproducible and much more accessible and repeatable for different stakeholders. This whole problem space was recognized by the European Commission back in 2016, where a position paper was published. It's titled the European Cloud Initiative, and it's basically a problem statement which raises a number of questions about how to maximize the incentives for sharing scientific outcomes, scientific data, scientific applications, and software, how to make those accessible, reusable by the scientific cycle, how to interconnect data and software produced by different disciplines in order to eliminate the silo effect, and how to coordinate the support training that's available for data scientists and these scientists in Europe to make the best use of that knowledge. The document basically set an ambitious goal to establish a trusted open environment for the scientific community by 2020, in which environment scientists can store, share, and reuse each other's data and scientific results. And that led to a number of initiatives that try to formulate that big vision or problem space and break that down into real actions. The Commission, after publishing that document, set up different high-level expert groups which produce different types of reports to clarify the challenges and opportunities in the European Open Science Cloud, held different huge events. And then a major milestone was reached last November, where the first implementation, we can call it implementation, of the European Open Science Cloud was put out, and it's accessible through the EOSC-portal.eu. Since November, we are continuously working on improving that, expanding the scope, and making this whole offering more attractive and more usable for scientists. This EOSC-hub Early Adopter program fits into that vision and makes this uptake hopefully more successful and more broad for the different scientists. After the portal was launched, the EOSC portal was launched, different kind of boards were established, and that's background information for you. So EOSC is, from 2019 is really taking a momentum by establishing a governance and executive board. And later this year, an EOSC symposium, a large event, is planned in Budapest. The actual implementation of EOSC is structured and defined through an implementation roadmap, which defines 6 lines of actions, from architecture through data, services, access and interfaces, governance, and rules of participation. And in the last couple of years, the European Commission launched, co-funded several H2020 projects to work on these 6 action lines. And here I just put the logos of those projects to indicate that there is a significant momentum already in those projects to contribute to the implementation. And further projects will start later this year, focusing on different regional initiatives. What we will focus on now are 3 of these projects: the EOSC-hub, the OCRE, and the OpenAIRE-led OpenAIRE-Advance project. And specifically, I will talk next about the different services that these projects offer for research communities, and specifically through the early adopter program for you. So let me start with EOSC-hub, which is the largest project on this whole landscape so far. It's a 33 million euro H2020 project with more than 100 partners involved. It started nearly 18 months ago, on the 1st of January 2018, and will run for another 18 months until the end of next year. The project is coordinated by EGI Foundation, and the mission of the project is to establish the hub, which can be considered as the core of the European Open Science Cloud, the integration and management system that federates the different kind of services from the European landscape and makes them accessible through the European Open Science Cloud interfaces. The project itself consists of 4 types of activities. The first, the foremost important one, are the services that the project delivers. These are the services that scientists, scientific teams, and projects can access through the European Open Science Cloud portal. These services range from scientific data that can be downloaded or processed on online compute facilities, to different software applications and tools that are offered as services through the internet, to baseline compute, storage, connectivity, network services, training and consultancy that are required for the uptake. The second area of work are the so-called federation services, which act as the glue to stick together the services into an integrated offering, to harmonize the access management, accounting, the monitoring of the health and proper operation of the services, and to make all of this accessible through a marketplace interface. The third area are the federated operations, which is basically documentation for the operational teams and how to operate the services at the production scale, how to interact with the users or customers, how to arrange service level agreements, how to gather their feedback, and how to incorporate that feedback into the continuous improvement process. The last area of work are the harmonization and establishment of processes and policies that govern the operation and simplify the access for the users. But think here about the terms of use across different services, the different standards that the services have to comply with, and so on and so forth. In this webinar, I will go into the details of the first area, the services, because these are the ones that are relevant for the early adopter program. The services that the EOSC-hub project offers range from generic services that are applicable and relevant for any discipline to more science discipline specific services that range from humanities through engineering, medical and health sciences to natural sciences. While the generic services are provided by e-infrastructures, the science discipline specific services are more provided by research communities, research infrastructures, and specific institutes from within disciplinary science that are tasked to operate IT services for that discipline. Let me start with detailing the infrastructure services that, as you can see here, are offered by the EGI Federation, by the EUDET Federation, and by the Indigo Data Cloud project or community. And let me show these generic services along the so-called research data lifecycle, which I'm sure you are all familiar with. The research data lifecycle basically captures the essence of how research is conducted by a researcher defining a project or a research or formulating a research question, which starts with the state of the art, starts with identifying what can I reuse from what has been already done. Here, when we talk about the e-science and the online research, we think about what data sets are already available, what applications or tools are already available to process the data, to mine the data, to have a new understanding of the meaning of the data. These kind of elements can be discovered and reused from two services in EOSC or EOSC-hub, the B2Find and the marketplace, which I will talk about soon. And once the state-of-the-art tools are understood or resources are obtained, then the next stage is doing a processing and analysis, which will help the research project answer new types of questions. During the processing and analysis, there is a vast amount and quality of services that are offered from EOSC-hub, ranging from ready-to-use online applications to baseline federated high-throughput computing, cloud computing infrastructures that provide different levels of abstraction from the infrastructure level, where you have full control of the virtual machines, to more platform-like approaches where you have higher level of complexity. There are tools and services offered for the hosting and processing of highly sensitive data, such as the ePut and TSD services in the catalog. There are high-level scripting interfaces, such as the Jupyter Notebook, which are hosted inside cloud networks in EGI. There are more domain-specific data analytics to visualize, to analyze data of a given format and background. Workflow management to define multi-stage computational steps, or to orchestrate complex workloads on cloud or high-throughput compute infrastructures. And after the analysis stage is completed, then typically researchers or research projects move on curating the results, separating the useful findings from the noise or the background information, making sure that the relevant information is preserved for the long term, for which the EOSC-hub project and its network of providers offer various types of services, from permanent identity provisioning service to long-term archival service to certification of repositories. And then sharing the results with the broader public can again happen in different forms, depending on the nature of the result, whether it's a software, whether it's a virtual machine image for others to reuse, whether it's a data or data set. There can be different services obtained. So this is just a spectrum of the possibilities that the EOSC-hub offers under the generic services area. The other project that participates in the early adopter program is the OpenAIRE-Advance. Their offering is more focused on the initial stage of data management, starting with writing a data management plan, which maybe many of you are familiar with. That is now a requirement in Horizon 2020 projects to prepare a data management plan, a document that defines the type of data that a project will generate, will use, will preserve, will share with the broader public, defining what protocols and policies will rule and be used by those data. The OpenAIRE-Advance project provides a tool called EasyDMP, which is a platform where researchers can generate data management plans by filling different types of forms and receiving recommendations. Another technical tool that the OpenAIRE-Advance project offers is a Zenodo repository, which is a data repository where scientific data scientific workflows, publications, and other research artifacts can be stored for the long term and preserved, plus different kinds of monitoring infrastructure around that in order to measure the impact, the reuse, the visits on those artifacts by fellow researchers. The last technical tool that the OpenAIRE-Advance project offers is the Amnesia tool, which can help to anonymize data, which is relevant for researchers and for projects that deal with sensitive data of different types. So before moving those data onto public infrastructures for processing or post-processing, you can use Amnesia to anonymize the data. Besides the technical tools, the OpenAIRE-Advance project also offers human support, similarly to EOSC-hub, based on national open access desks, which are people in different member states tasked to consult researchers on open access policies, practices, advise them on tools, and mainly on repositories that they can use to store and share research artifacts in an open access manner. And the next project I want to talk about, because it's also participating in the early adopter program, is OCRE, a recently started Horizon 2020 project, which aims to bring commercial services into the European Open Science Cloud. The project facilitates the usage of commercial cloud services by bulk purchasing such services from commercial providers, bringing those services into the European Open Science Cloud, and co-funding the use of those services on behalf of the end-user research communities. Through the early adopter program, OCRE offers 100,000 euros as adoption funds, which OCRE will pay for commercial cloud providers that are listed on this slide, and will distribute that capacity in the form of prepaid vouchers to those who will participate in the early adopter program of EOSC-hub. These early adopters using the vouchers will be able to access cloud computing services from those providers without the need of directly paying them, because the OCRE project will pre-finance these to the commercial sector. The last contributor of the early adopter program is GÉANT, which is, probably many of you know, is the Federation of National Research and Education Networks. Each national research and education network primarily operates the network connectivity to research universities, to research centers, and different research institutes in the different countries. And the NRENs are federated and connected together by GÉANT into a pan-European network where high bandwidth data transfers are possible between the different endpoints. The GÉANT Federation offers, on one hand, a physical network to those institutes. Then, on value-added services on top of that, you probably know EduRoam, the Wi-Fi service that's available at most of these public research and educational institutes, and also in a growing number of public places, and other services that relate somehow to the networking and the connectivity, such as the EduGAIN, which is a federated login system to online services, the GÉANT Cloud Services, the same framework that's used by OCRE to purchase or bulk purchase cloud offerings from commercial sector, and several other tools. In the context of the early adopter program, the GÉANT will bring in services from the connectivity and network management field, which basically we expect will be of relevance to those early adopters who would like to move large data sets from their home institutes or from their partner institutes into cloud compute or high throughput compute or data archival institutes and services offered by EOSC. The other area that is relevant are the cloud computing services, but these, as I said, the same services and through the same framework that the OCRA project we are now bringing into the collaboration and into EOSC. And let me show you a few examples of how communities that are participating in the EOSC-hub project since last January are using these services. Hopefully this gives you some ideas of what you can use these services for, and also show you a possible combination of the services for a complex use case. The first example I have is from the Integrated Carbon Observation System, or ICOS research infrastructure, which is one of the research infrastructures on the S3 roadmap. The mission of ICOS is to quantify and understand the greenhouse gas balance of the European continent. And one of the application use cases they have is monitoring the carbon dioxide concentration across Europe by having measurement stations deployed across several hundred or even thousands of stations, collecting that data in real time and pumping that data into big storage facilities. Then from there, staging the data out into high throughput compute, high performance compute, and cloud compute services, where they can generate different data products that are understandable by the scientists who want to visualize the changes in the carbon dioxide concentration. These researchers interact with the whole system through a carbon portal, and through the EOSC-hub collaboration and through the EOSC-hub project, the ICOS research infrastructure on one hand is using the GÉANT connectivity to pump the data from the measurement stations into data centers where the data is stored and archived. It's replicated for fault tolerance reasons. It's staged to compute cloud resources, and then it's pumped to the carbon portal in the form of ready-to-use data products, which are displayed on various graphical interfaces. So these green boxes indicate the services and the partners that are participating from EOSC-hub in making this whole use case happen. The second example is the International Fusion Physics community, which would like to bring together their existing data sets that have been accumulated over decades at different fusion reactor sites in Europe, making those data sets replicated between the fusion sites in order to enable cross data sets analysis, and would like to stage those data to large cloud compute centers where complex analysis and visualization can take place. This will be utmost important for upcoming new reactors that will generate magnitudes bigger data sets that the past experiments did. In this whole setup, the fusion community is experiencing with the check-in service, which is an access control service from EOSC, with a data replication and data caching system called Data Hub and One Client, and with EGI Cloud Compute Services to enable the processing. The ultimate goal of the community is to enable scientists to define and run compute workflows that are using simulational models from the ITER integrated modeling and analysis suite, and they would like to hide the backend complexity of distributed data and distributed compute resources from them. So hopefully these two examples gave you some idea about the type of experiments that you could run with the use of EOSC-hub, OpenAIRE-Advance, and GÉANT services. And to get into the practicalities, we suggest you to first take a look at the services that the EOSC already includes. I mentioned the EOSC portal, which was opened in last November. That's the main website of the EOSC portal. And under the services and resources menu, you can see the different categories of services we offer. Once you go into the category, you can search for different, or you can find different elements inside that. or alternatively, with the search button, you can search for specific services in advance. The services that the EOSC-hub project specifically contributes to EOSC are, once you find a service, you will be taken to the so-called marketplace. This is a backend system behind the EOSC portal. So once you are in the EOSC portal, you will be redirected to it. This is the interface where you can have more detailed description about the EOSC-hub services, where you can find user manuals or user guides, some past training materials to give you further idea about what the service actually do, how others are using it. Through the marketplace, you can directly request access to individual services or to a bag of services if you wish so. But you don't have to do that yet, because there is the early adopter program. And this early adopter program has been opened by EOSC-hub in collaboration with those other projects for research communities who require combined use of multiple services and resources from this EOSC landscape. Typically, research communities who work with complex projects and deal with grand societal challenges, such as the global warming or CO2 or fusion or energy safety, the examples I mentioned earlier. The services that are in scope of the early adopter program are offered by these four players: EOSC-hub, OCRE, OpenAIRE, and GÉANT. And hopefully on the previous slides, you heard enough to get an idea about the services themselves. In order to study the full portfolio in more details, we provide you here the links. The OpenAIRE and GÉANT services are available directly on the EOSC-hub, on the EOSC portal. Then you can study more the EOSC-hub services through the marketplace, which again, as I said, is linked to the portal. So that's the main landing page. And then the OCRE services, because the OCRE is a new project, are not yet in the EOSC portal interface. However, on the previous slide, I listed you the commercial cloud providers whose offering will be purchased OCRE on behalf of the user communities. And here is a direct link to the list of those commercial providers if you wish to study them. So the areas that you can think of as application use case for your submission: the challenges related to data discovery, reuse of data, processing and analysis, management of data such as the curation and preservation, accessing, depositing, and sharing the data, federating the authentication and authorization to enable access to international, multinational communities. These are just some examples, but we see these are the typical examples of building blocks that people use EOSC for. What are the benefits and what you can get by applying? The selected applicants will receive in a 6 to 12 months period the following things. First, you will get access to infrastructure services that are relevant for your particular submission, where you can pilot the technical solution. These infrastructure setups will have the software and the data, if you want to reuse third-party data, already pre-staged, and will grant you and your collaborators access to interact with those. We will assign you with support experts who can help you integrate your particular domain-specific applications and models, who can help you stage or pipe your particular data that you want to work with. The testbed infrastructure, or the infrastructure we offer in the call, is stated to be up to 150 CPU cores, 300 gigabytes of memory, 2 terabytes of storage for the data analysis part, and 10 terabytes for the long-term archiving. The call already states that other bigger requests will be also considered. It will be a question of negotiating that bigger capacity by us with the relevant providers. Also, the selected participants will receive travel funds to attend relevant face-to-face meetings as needed to perform the piloting and integration activities, and also to promote the achievement, such as at the upcoming EOS Symposium in November. At the end of the 6 to 12 months period, a subset of the selected early adopter projects will receive even further support to scale up their pilots to full-scale production operation, where the most critical element will be obtaining and discussing and securing even bigger capacity for a longer period of time. So this job will be also done by EOSC-hub and its partners. A few additional remarks or topics that are in the text of the early adopter program call, but I would like to highlight them. These are the things to keep in mind when you draft your application to the program. First and foremost, important evaluation criteria will be the impact that your work or our work together would make. The impact can be measured by the number of users, by the different disciplinary areas that it will benefit, the number of partners, and the type of institutes it will benefit. A typical measure will be the involvement and the support by research infrastructures from the European or national landscape, by research organizations or major projects that are contributing to this work or would benefit from the result of this work. The call encourages you to consider the open access publishing and consuming of third-party research artifacts, which can be data sets that you want to use in your setup from third parties or applications that you want to use from third parties. We encourage you to adopt the Horizon 2020 open access approach, where a data management plan is required, and we can also help you writing and preparing such a data management plan at the very beginning of the project. The spectrum of the work, I mentioned a couple of examples, but this spectrum will be also taken into consideration when evaluating the proposals, how broad and how diverse data challenges you try to tackle, from the data integration, management, interoperability, analysis, curation, and so on and so forth. Be encouraged to apply if your applications or if your setup already demonstrated success in some in-house or institutional or some regional infrastructure, because that's a good starting point to scale up the operations to external resources through EOSC. And we will also, of course, evaluate the proposals based on their realistic timeline to complete within 6 to 12 months. So let me close with this slide, which is showing you the timeline. So the deadline to apply is the middle of June. You can do that through the application form, which is on the website of the early adopter program. There are a couple of questions. This is not the total list of questions. It's a cut-off screenshot, but the form is not very long. We will evaluate and notify the submitters, each of them, by the end of September. The projects, the accepted projects, can start on the 1st of November, and from there they can run from 6 to 12 months. Thank you for the attention. Now it's time for questions.
Hi, this is Rob Curlier from Trust IT Services. Just to let you know how the question and answer portion works. So feel free to raise your hand. We will unmute you, or you can also send your question by the chat, and we will alternate between those who ask the questions there. So feel free, don't be shy. Okay, I see we have our first question from Matthew Giddin. Matthew, you have the floor.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name is Matthew Giddin. I'm a researcher at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, where we do a lot of climate change related research, specifically on energy systems. We're quite interested in the potential of the project, but the question we had was, so you mentioned that there would be 6 to 12 months of support initially, and at the end of that, there would be additional support to scale up to full-scale production. But I was also interested in so would there then be some sort of pricing plan after that period, or what is the perceived relationship with the successful applicants after this 12-month period? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the whole European Open Science Cloud is a federation of providers where there is no money directly flowing from or through projects like EOSC-hub, and where each provider has its own kind of conditions of providing the services. So whether there will be any pricing model after 12 months will depend on what services exactly your project will need. I can tell you about the examples or the experiences we have so far. When we support communities, then we, in the beginning, do a negotiation based on their requirements with the providers that are best matching those requirements. And the matching can be both functional or financial or many other aspects. And typically, in this negotiation phase, we also clarify the conditions that the customers like you would like to see when using the services, whether your community is able to pay or not. We'll give a different subset of providers who can respond and serve you. In most of the cases, when we work with scientific research communities, we can find providers who can provide capacity for free, because those scientific IT providers are paid by the national or regional funding agencies to support science. So they are already prepaid in some form to support projects like yours. But it's a negotiation. That's why there is no single answer. It always comes down to what specific services you will need and who is able to provide those services for the type of community that you are involved in. Does this answer your question, or you need further clarification?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matthew. Okay, our next question comes from Luis Alfonso Ariño. Luis, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I also wrote the question, but are there any special guidelines for national entrants to facilitate the dissemination between research centers and universities?
The dissemination of what? Exactly?
Dissemination of information, of this information. So how can we help our research centers and institutes and to know about this program?
So disseminating this opportunity of the early adopter program, just go ahead and do it on your own. I think these slides are available, the website link is available, and you know what's the best channels and mechanisms to reach your people locally. After we receive the submissions, we will do a matchmaking with the involvement of GÉANT as well, to see what's the geographical coverage, for example, of the applicants. And where we see the need, we will bring in the local NREM into supporting those applicants.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Luis. We have a question from Dalibor. I'm just going to unmute you now. Dalibor, you have the floor.
Hi. I have a question. We already are using your service provided by EGI. Could we shift them under the program, or there are some limitation? I'm from ACDH.
From C?
ACDH, OAV, Austrian Academy of Science, Austrian Center for Digital Humanities.
And you are interested in applying to the program.
Yeah, we're already using resources in the cloud and would like to apply for the program.
Yeah, feel free to do so. If your use case or what you do already isn't covered by the EOSC-hub project yet, then you can apply to the program, and then through that you can get even more services.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Dalibor. Are there any other questions for anyone? Okay, we have a question.
So the only thing, just still for this last question about Austria, the only thing to avoid is to submit a request which is covering the same work or the same use case that is already financed in the EOSC-hub project. But if your use case isn't one of those that are already in the EOSC-hub project, just feel free. Even if you are a member of the consortium of EOSC-hub, you can submit further use cases from different disciplines or from the same discipline but different subgroups, and you are eligible for this early adopter program in that case.
Right. Next question comes from, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ansa Hinola. The floor is yours. Ms. Hinola?
Hi, Anka. I see you are unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yes.
Well, I just sent a small a question via chat. What about setting up an institutional repository for research data? Would you help with that?
I believe so. That's one of the expertise of OpenAIRE-Advance, which is also part of this early adopter program. So I would say yes, but I can confirm that for you and send you an email answer.
Okay, so let's keep in touch then about this. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Anka. Are there any other questions? I see a question from Matthew Giddin. Matthew, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. So like I said previously, I think we have a lot of interest here. Looking at your example slide where you talk about the carbon monitoring, one of the things that I note here is that there's a relatively sophisticated front end provided to the users that then would pass, that does the data transfer. Then you do the computation on the services provided, you do the storage on the services provided, and then you return results back to this front end. I was curious, is there any actual front end support supported by the program, or would that need to be developed by the hosting institution that would be successful?
I'm afraid that has to be developed by the hosting institution, which is outside of the scope of this call.
Yeah, okay.
Because these interfaces are really very specific, and what EOSC is about kind of cross-virtualization and reusage of patterns and tools across multiple disciplines.
Sure. Okay, that sounds great. I guess the genesis of my question is that we are envisioning applications that would have a relatively nice sort of user interface, but this is obviously also outside of the general scientific domain, right? We develop the models, the processing capability, and so I guess I don't know. Do you know how, in the example you showed, are you familiar with the context of how they developed that front end, or was that part of their application? And yeah, can you provide any more context there?
I can provide you with context, but that front-end development was fully outside of the EOSC-hub project or any of the projects where we work together with ICOs. That's typically done by their by research institute, or sorry, research infrastructure funding, which is independent from this kind of e-infrastructure and e-science aspect. What technologies they use and what funding they use for that particular work, I don't know. But I can, if you drop me an email, you can find my email address by Googling my name, gergely.sipos@EGI.eu, and then drop me an email and I can connect you with the representatives of that community so you can explore that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, or you can also send it by the chat. Okay, it seems we have answered all the questions. I leave the floor to you, Gergely.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, take note of this URL and you can find my slides. And if you have further questions about the program, please use the early adopter at mailman.eosc-hub.eu email address and we get back to you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.